Welcome to the REI Foundation Podcast, where we cover all the steps and strategies to make your real estate dreams a reality. Now your hosts, Jason and Peely.
So this is the REI Foundation with Peely and Jason. Welcome, Reed. We have
Hi, guys.
Goossens with us.
Good morning, Reed. How are you?
I'm doing really, really well. Friday morning, about to start the long weekend, so pretty pumped to be having a few days off and maybe not think about real estate and business for a little while.
That's great.
Do you have moments where you're not thinking about real estate?
It's very rarely. I was at a speaking engagement last night till like 10:30, 11 o'clock. I'm up again this morning at 6:30 a.m. doing podcasts with you guys. Just had you guys on the show. It's awesome. Yep. So I love it. I live and breathe it, but it also is nice to sometimes turn the brain off.
I completely understand. I completely understand.
So Reed, you're in California, but you come from Australia and you came over to United States a couple years back. And I don't know if your first step was in real estate, but why don't you give us we'd love to know a little bit more about you and what brought you to the United States and what got you into real estate? Yeah.
I love telling this question. Who doesn't love talking about themselves for a little bit? No, the real reason I moved to the United States, rewind, let's go back to 2008, 2009. I was living, so my background's in structural engineering. I'm looking at a picture on my wall actually of my first multifamily that I was a construction engineer on back in New York. But I moved to London in 2008. To work on the summer 2012 Olympic Games as a structural engineer. Just graduated university. I was over there, had great time. I then quit my job, or the job finished up, and I went to move to the south of France, and I started working on these super yachts as a deckhand for the wealthy, the stupidly wealthy. During that time, I was backpacking around the south of France. I was gallivanting, having a great time. I actually met my future wife on the beach in Spain, who happened to be from Southern California. At the time, so this is 2009, I went back to working on the yachts. I had a great, next 12 months. I came to the United States because the yachts, if you don't know anything about super yachts, they spend their time in the Mediterranean when it's summer, and then when it's winter up there, they come down the Caribbean. So I cruised across the Atlantic Ocean, most incredible experience of my entire life. But in saying that, it was also, I was living in a fishbowl, and I had been, I'd gone to university and I had a degree, and I was like, look, I don't want to be a deckhand for the rest of my life. This was great for 12 months. Backpacked through New York. At last port of call was LA, and I called up Erica and I was like, hey, I'm coming through LA. Do you want to hang out? And she's like, yeah, actually, by the way, I've just applied for university in Australia. And I was like, what the hell? What's the coincidence?
Wow.
This is 2009. Why? So the reason I moved to the United States was that I didn't move to the United States till after she'd finished her postgrad in Australia. So 2009, she moved in 2010 to Australia. Around that time, I had obviously been away for 2 years. I was sitting in my cubicle as a structural engineer. I was like, I cannot be doing this for the rest of my life. I picked up Rich Dad Poor Dad. That's where the bugs started. And, over the next 18 months, I essentially was, going to REIA events in Australia, and I was going to pull the trigger on a flip in Aussie. And then it was but I still had this yearning desire to live in New York City because I love New York City. And that's when in 2011, we just packed up our bags. I quit my job. I didn't have a job in New York, but she was from America. So I was like, let's just try and make this work. There was an awesome visa situation with Aussies and Americans. So I just landed on the ground in New York, had no plan. And I was just like, there's no plan B. It was just like, I have to get a job. And I pounded the streets. I just walked around and... Anyway, that's sort of 2011, and then within sort of the first 6 to 12 months, I purchased my first real estate property because the United States has such a lower barrier to entry compared to Aussies. So in a nutshell, that's me. And then fast forward, I now own RSN Property Group, as you can see behind me. Been involved in about $50 million, $60 million worth of real estate since then, and loving life. So that's a little bit about me in a nutshell.
What a life.
Yeah,
wow.
I guess if anything that the listeners can take out there is, so if you have not done your first property, what's stopping you? So you just went through a around the world tour to get your first property, but it just came down to it. You said, I'm going to do this, and you did it.
Right. It's about backing yourself, right?
Yeah.
It's about backing yourself.
That's incredible. So today now you sit here, you've done 50 to 60 million in deal flow. What is your main focus where you sit today?
Main focus is really on, everyone talks about financial freedom. Yes, I've been involved in $50, $60 million worth of real estate. I'm a co-GP in that sort of portfolio. I'm still working towards, the goals of my financial freedom. I've got RSN Property Group. I've got a couple of potential new employees. I'm really excited about the journey which I'm on. I also consult. I have a couple of other side businesses. It's very much the millennial mindset of where we live in this new economy. So yes, real estate's my number one focus, but to get you to financial freedom, you try everything, right? Like you guys have another active business outside of what you do. And it's just about rolling with the punches and making it work, right? You just do what you can. Yeah, exactly. So right now I'm focused on just really setting up my systems with RSN Property Group, making sure I have the right team to support me in terms of my decisions, because I've always thought of myself as that leader, and I want to direct the company, but I don't necessarily need to get into the weeds of underwriting. I do like doing that because I'm an engineer by background, but I also don't need to spend hours and hours and hours poring over a spreadsheet. I can hire someone to do that. So really enjoying growing a little team, and that's pretty cool, and having employees and stuff.
So let's talk about exactly what you do. What is RSN?
Yeah, RSN Property Group is a syndication firm. We focus on acquiring multifamily real estate. And the why that I started RSN was because when I first moved to the US back in 2011, the Aussie dollar was actually in parity with the US dollar. And so a lot of international investors, particularly from Australia, were coming over here buying turnkey properties. And turnkey, I don't like it that much because this profits are stripped out. There's a lot of guys who got the wool pulled over their eyes, essentially buying these things. They, the providers were buying it at 40 cents on the dollar. They were putting in them all the money, and these people like, wow, I can buy it for 120 grand and I can get $1,000 a month. That sounds beauty, but actually in reality, maybe it was probably overpriced. Now they're trying to manage this thing from halfway across the world. There's just a lot of people that didn't get a lot of good press in Australia. So I said, well, syndication, like other people's money, and why not, offer people a platform to get involved on the ground level. They don't have to get any financing because I'm based here, and we can all, benefit in adding value to a property. So that was the why behind starting RSN back in the day, and that's kind of what I focused on.
Let's take it real simple. Can you explain what syndication is for our listeners?
Sure. Yeah. So syndication is pooling investors' money together so you can go out and buy maybe a larger asset that you couldn't maybe purchase on your own, right? So why would you do that? Well, the why is because you could get into a larger, maybe less risky investment, more cash flowing investment, more stable investment with more investors. So we're not, like any company, Google, Facebook, the founders don't just sit on a wad of cash and just grow their business with their own money. They have to go out to investors. So the reason I got to a point in my life when I was here in America, I bought a small portfolio. I'd flipped a few houses. I sort of just ran out of my own money, and I needed to start syndicating. I need to grow my business. Well, the way you grow your business is bringing on investors. And so that's what syndication is, and that's why I do it.
That's amazing.
Thank you.
So you talk about your journey from Australia to the United States and working on syndication. Why not do this in Australia?
Good question. Because multifamily doesn't exist in Australia. So when you build a project in Australia, the bank will require you to pre-sale. It's like condominiums. They'll get you to pre-sale X amount, maybe 50% of the units before the construction financing will come in. So if you have a history of that, I couldn't just go out and buy 200 units in one complex in Australia. That just wouldn't happen. It's all condos. It's all, think of the Australian market like Los Angeles or a New York type product, so very high barriers to entry, even in a crappy suburb in like, up in the Bronx, you're still paying $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 for a single family property. That's the same in Australia. Our population is a lot smaller. So, and we're also confined by the fact that Australia is it's an arid country. So we only inhabit like, I think like 18% of our land. So, and you compare it to America where you have on one end, you have the LAs, New York, San Francisco's, and then you have Detroit on the other end, or Detroit's, and then you have 400 million people who need somewhere to live. So that it spores this sort of more affordable, multifamily type of real estate investing that is more beneficial for cash flow, more beneficial for yield, and that's something that just isn't in existence in Australia.
So to me, and because you mentioned that apartment investing is a lot less risky, not to me, but a lot of the listeners that are listening to this, they're like, well, why is that? I'm flipping a single family home, or I have a buy and hold, or a couple of buy and holds. I even have a portfolio.
Right.
And you're telling me that investing in like a multi-million-dollar apartment building is actually less risky. Why is that?
Let's talk about that for a little bit. So let's talk about the way that I always look at it, how banks look at it, right? That's what you got to step into their shoes and say, well, why would you in residential, and it's 4 units and under, the bank will say, okay, look, I'm going to underwrite you as the borrower because you are on the hook for the loan. The risk of someone moving out of your single family property and then your property is now 100% vacant, you have no rental income to pay down the mortgage, that's a high risk when you have less number of units, right? You now distribute that over 50 units. The bank is going to look at it more like a business and say, God forbid I fall over tomorrow and pass away. I don't want to do that, touch wood. But my building is still there producing income to pay the debt, right? So debt is always going to be more readily available, hence reducing the risk, because not 50 people are not just going to get up and leave like that, and you have no way of paying your debt off or your expenses or stuff like that. So does that answer the question in terms of risk and why?
Yeah, that's great. And you can put in there, you don't have 200 roofs either. You have one maintenance staff that can maybe handle one building. Like all those different points that allows you to benefit from economies of scale, and that's huge.
And I think I also want to hit on the fact that I flipped a few houses. It's a lot of work. You guys have flipped houses, I know that, but it's sort of more. You look at the curve, and it's like deploy capital. There's no capital. Deploy capital. There's no capital. There's not like a steady stream of cash flow. And I'm relying on the fact that I am dictated by the market. Like hopefully my drapes that I put in on my flooring is going to be priced compared to what someone else is down the road, rather than having a business in commercial real estate where it's valued by the income, the NOI. And if I can directly control that NOI, I directly control the asset, rather than relying upon other market indicators out there that someone's selling their property at $150 a square foot. And all of a sudden the market may take a turn. Flipping isn't necessarily it's not the most stable of games. But we could obviously get into a whole you buy right, sell right sort of stuff. But in general, that is what I like to value cash flow. I like to value NOI, so I can control the asset.
Nice.
Yeah, you could talk a little bit further about that. You're basically saying, when you flip a house, it's all based on what the buyer's perception of the house is. Do they love, do they love the kitchen? Do they love the tile? Do they love the neighborhood? Whereas the asset, when you're buying over 4 units, it comes down to the income it's producing. So you can simply improve the income. You've now made a property that's worth more.
Right. Case in point, I had a duplex in upstate New York when my first property I purchased. Went in there, bought it for I think $50,000, and I put in like $15,000, and I think I increased the rent by like $75. That's fantastic. Now that increased my cash flow per month, but it didn't actually increase the value of the property. Right? It's still worth $50,000, and maybe I overspent, and it's really not actually worth $65,000. It's really only still worth $55,000. If I did the same thing on 50 unit properties, and I increased 50 unit property, and I increased the rent by $65 a month, that directly forces the value of the property, right? Regardless of what the property next door is doing, right? So that's unlike flipping. Someone might have flipped a house across the road for $300,000, and you've put in, you want to sell yours for $350,000, but the market doesn't support $350,000. But you've already spent $300,000, but you need that $50,000 to make a profit. Yep. Well, unfortunately, you're going to say, well, you've overspent, and you are not going to get your $50,000. And I've been in that situation in Philadelphia.
Yeah. So you're in California, and now you're looking at markets. Are you looking in California? Where's your focus? And why is your focus where it is?
Yeah, so California is like, as you know, like you guys live in New Jersey and in New York, it's a low cap rate market. It's what I like to call a tier one market, where there's a lot of demand, there's not a lot of supply, so cap rates are low. The risk of investing those markets are lower. So you have cap rates in the order of 2 to 3%. My rule of thumb is I like to invest in sub-markets where there's about 150 to 200 basis points between interest rates in the market and what the market cap rate is. So if it's interest rates now around 4.5%, so I like to look at markets around a minimum of 6% cap rates. So then I can create cash flow. So where does 6% exist? Well, it doesn't exist in New York and it doesn't exist in LA. It kind of exists in the Midwest. So I then start looking at Kansas City's, Phoenix, Arizona, looking at Texas's, North Carolinas. You guys are in Louisville, Kentucky. These sort of tier two markets where there's good population growth, there's good economy drivers. Maybe it's just high affordable index stuff where people still want to live in those markets, but they're not maybe your top of your list if you're backpacking throughout the United States, right? Yeah, so I hope that explains where I'm investing.
No, it definitely does. And if you look at it, I mean, people may say this and say, oh, Reed, he's a little more risky. He lived in Australia, then all of a sudden he's in New York and he's California, so he's fine to invest out of there. But what is it that sets your mind frame where you say, well, listen, I may live here, but it doesn't work here. So I'm going to go where it works. And even though I don't live in that certain market, I'm able to find deals that work. How do you set your mind right that you're able to go into these markets? And what would be some suggestions you have for people who are maybe just trying to get started to say that it's okay that if you're not investing in your market, it's just okay to do that. If it doesn't work, you don't have to force it to work.
Right. I think my crude answer is ignorance is an excuse. So if you're blinded by what Uncle Bob says and you're limited by your beliefs, then that's your own fault. So you can only change that. My biggest driving factor in life was that I'm 31 years old. I moved to the United States when I was 26. I have lived in Australia for maybe a year and a half in my whole 20s. So I was born and bred to travel the world. I was also born and bred to, and I was raised to, if I was 60 years old, and the biggest thing I'm fearful of is that if I'm 60, I wake up in my retirement home and I have regret. I regret that, what if I had moved to United States? What if I had chased that girl on the beach in Spain? I'm now marrying that girl. Take those calculated risks and give it a go, because right now we live in an economy where the old adage of what our parents have a career for 30, 40 years of their life, that's out the window. You, as I was explained before, you have to take action to take control of your life. Change, as Tony Robbins says, change your story, change your life. I changed my story. I moved to the United States. I changed my life completely. Sitting at 21 years of age at my graduation from structural engineering, I would never have thought I'd be involved in a real estate syndicator in 10 years later. But I had the mindset of that I'm willing to learn and I'm willing to make a change and I'm willing to do what it takes to make that change to get to achieve my goals. So hopefully that makes sense.
I love that mindset. And congratulations on your upcoming wedding.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you.
That's incredible. No, I love it. I absolutely love it because it just sets up the parameters, is that a lot of people go through life that, well, this is what I do, so this is what I have to do. Well, no, it's not. But you have to start with your mind first and set your mind up. And then from that, you can do other things. It doesn't have to be real estate either. Exactly. Do stuff that is outside of what you know, because you're always going to start with not knowing it until you actually go into it.
And I think that we live in such an exciting time, 2017, things are so much more accessible. Like, it goes back to that ignorance thing. Like, I was learning about, selling stuff on Amazon the other day. I was like, wow, you can create a cash flow business like doing that. Like, but it's the willingness to want to learn. If you don't want to learn and you just want to sit on the fence and just keep doing what you're doing, good luck to you. But don't whinge when you say, oh, my life is crap, or whatever, I haven't achieved what I want to achieve. That's on you. That's on no one else. It's not on the government. It's not on your sister. It's not on your mum and dad. It's on you. So, nice. Take control.
On you. Hear that, everyone? It's on you. It's on you to take action. It's on you to change your life.
Yeah,
That's the way it's going to happen.
And that's one of the toughest things to do, because a lot of we all get in ourselves. We all can deflect outward and say, "Oh, it's because of this or it's because of that." But when you really just focus that I'm responsible for my actions, I'm responsible for myself, and if I can look at myself first and just make myself just a little bit better each day, it's going to transcend wherever I want to go.
100%.
Yeah.
So we are big on foundations here, and you've given us so much when it comes to syndication and big apartment investing for a person's foundation. So if I'm like a new investor just getting into it, maybe I have a few flips under my belt, like how you started.
Yep.
What would you say would be like the first steps into getting into syndication, into getting into big apartment investing?
Yeah, well, I can even take us one step back even further. If you've got some listeners who are just like, "Oh my gosh, what's real estate? What the hell is this thing?" Like, let's not even talk about a syndication, right? Like, let's look at making a step in a direction. One of the biggest things when I first read Rich Dad Poor Dad was that I knew I needed to make a change, but I didn't know how I needed to make a change. And it comes down to, if you have that desire within you to make change because you're not happy with the current situation you're already going towards somewhere correct. It's just about making sure that sorry, I had my phone call coming in. Making sure that you have the right, you've already made the conscious decision, okay, something's going up right. I want to make a change. How do I put that into action? Well, I can challenge people to do a very simple thing, and that is get on meetup.com, go to a local REIA event. And I challenge those people that if they go to one real estate networking event per month for the next 6 months, they would have changed it, would have met enough people to get them to that step 2. And then step 2 will come from step 3, and step 3 will come from step 4. So it's not even about making a transition from flipping to syndication. It's just about the fact that when I first moved to the United States, when I first picked up Rich Dad Poor Dad, I had a desire to understand that I need to make change. Okay, so how do I make change? Let's just take the first baby step, which is let's just go to a networking event. And it doesn't have to be real estate. It could be business, entrepreneurship, whatever it might be. Surround yourself with like-minded people, and you will reap the rewards. What's the saying? You are the average of the 5 people you surround yourself with. Well, firstly, let's look at the 5 people you surround yourself with. If they're negative people that are going nowhere in life, but you want to make a change, get out of that group of friends and go make some new friends. It's easy. It comes down to you making that conscious decision to make change. So
taking that first step. That's great advice.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. We've heard it a few times, is you can't worry about steps 8, 9, and 10. And you have to start with step 1, because you're never going to get it. You can worry all day long about, well, how are we going to get the $50 or $60 million of assets? Well, with step 1. So let's
just go to a networking event.
Yeah,
let's
exactly.
just even see this is for me, right? You might be saying, "Oh, is real estate for me? Do I like the numbers?" Let's just go listen to, Jason and Peely's podcast. But that could even be a step. Drive to work every day and listen to a podcast, because that's going to change. Your car is a university on wheels, and it can be. And go out and take step number 1. You don't get to deal number 15 without taking step number 1.
Yeah, that's right. That's great. So on that,
one other thing I just want to add to that is, I personally, I'm sure you guys, real estate is like a drug, right? Like once you do your first deal, you're like, okay, this is a snowball effect, and you're just getting bigger and bigger. You guys just closed on 94 units, which is awesome. But
thank you.
It is like this sort of, I can feel it. I might have made a mistake. I've made mistakes, but you still keep driving towards that financial freedom. So there's something about it, and that's all I'm going to leave it at. But
it's incredible. And so with step 1, you've set up your directions you want to go. So you're here at this point today. Where do you want to take yourself and your business in the next 5 years?
Yeah, the next 5 years, my goal is to get to 2,000 units within the next 24 months. Awesome. So that's the goal. I definitely want to be. I've created this framework that I'm really into at the moment. It's called AID, A-I-D, Acquisitions, Investment, Development. Acquisitions being that, what is on the acquisition side? Okay, there's deal underwriting. I've got that covered with my mentors. With my employees. Maybe someday in the future, RSN may be into the brokerage because that's in acquisition. I don't know. Maybe there's opportunities for me to grow my business in the brokerage space. Okay, let's talk about the investing. Okay, there's asset management. I already do that. Fantastic. I want to continue to grow that. But maybe I want to also get in property management one day, right? We'll have 2,000 units. It may get bigger. And maybe in the I might start. I've always had this passion to have this great portfolio, and instead of buying retail for flooring, I'm going to go to China and just pick it up direct. That's creating a business out of that. And then there's the D, which is what I love most, and that's ground up development. But ground up development doesn't always work, and it's also a whole lot of higher risk if you don't know what you're doing. But development, construction management, maybe there's a construction team along the way at RSN. So that's the framework, and they're the things I can plug in. I'm already plugging in a few things here and there under A, under I, and actually some stuff under D because I consult for a couple of developers here in LA. But in general, that's where I'm going, and that's what I want to have, a well-rounded business that can rely on different legs when the market goes up and down.
Incredible.
So does that answer the question?
Yeah, we love it. We love it. Now, and with that, who are some of your mentors?
Well, you and I share a mentor, and that's I was one of the early students of Mr. Joe Fellis back in 2013. I think I was one of the really early ones. So, and I have this. You guys will know. You just started your podcast, but starting actually podcasting, I've got my own podcast, but doing that is really methodical for me. I love it. I love getting on and talking to other. That's kind of like a mentor in itself, right? Because
it has been.
It's just you get to get excited to start the day out. It's awesome.
Exactly.
There's I've got a lot of other. Exactly. I've got a lot of other mentors. My dad's been a big part of my life. He had some success earlier in his career. I don't come from, I'm not a wealthy person. My parents are both teachers back in Australia, and I've come from humble beginnings. But he had some success, and he always said to me, a fool and their money are easily parted. So what does that mean? Well, don't be a fool and go out and get yourself educated. So that's that was always a takeaway piece of advice that I've actually got written on the wall. A fool and their money are easily parted. But throughout life, there's going to be different mentors, and as I said, the podcast, Joe, my dad. I come across other people. I've started a few mastermind groups with other entrepreneurs to try and spitball and mastermind and just sounding board sort of stuff, which helps me ground myself and make me because I'm Reed Goossens. I'm in RSN kind of by myself with a couple of employees. It can be sometimes lonely, so you want to check in with some other people and make sure that you're on the right path and you keep cracking towards your goals. So yeah.
You mentioned podcasts. Can you tell me? Can you tell us more about your podcast? Yeah,
sure. So, as you know, I have a weird accent. So, when I first moved to this country, like when I was talking about the turnkey, I noticed not many people were talking to international investors. Right? There's a lot of hype about investing in the United States. It's the currency is strong. The government's got strong government. There's good yield. But no one was like, well, how do I even get started? And I had to be that guy. Like when I first moved here, I had no credit. I, had about a bit of cash, but I had to buy my first property all cash because I had no credit. I had to get an LLC set up. Like, what's an LLC? What's escrow? Like all these things just weren't readily available for an international investor when you first get here, but you have to learn. So I sort of started my own podcast. It's called Investing in the US, and it's an Aussie's Guide to US Real Estate. I just had Jason on the show, which has been awesome. And it's really just sort of talking more to those international investors who do want to come here and start investing in the United States. And, I have aspirations for it to be more than just real estate. And, one day, that's why I named it aptly Investing in the US. It could be anything. So it's awesome. Entrepreneurialism to business. So yeah.
Perfect.
Wow.
Perfect. Well, what's the link to the podcast and where can people reach out to you?
Yeah, so you can jump on my website at rsnpropertygroup.com/podcast. ReedGoossens.com is coming soon. As you guys know, when you're building out all your different social media platforms, it's like website after website after website you've got to create, but they're all coming. It's the 80-20 rule. It's up and running, and you can find me on iTunes as well. And if anyone is ever in LA, please hit me up. I love going out for a beer or coffee. You can hit me up at Reed, that's REED, at RSN Property RSNPropertyGroup.com. I always love meeting up for just talking shop. So, yeah.
That's
you hear
great.
that, everyone? Whenever you're in California, hit Reed up, buy him a cup of coffee or a pint of beer, and you pick his brain.
We'll take this surfboard out behind me and we'll go through and catch a wave.
Nice.
That's great. That's great. All right. Well, we'd love to have some words to live by from you.
Yeah, that's a good question. Words to live by. I've always, again, I guess the big one, a fool and their money are easily putted. Another big one that I'm very much a moral. I'm not a huge religious guy, but I'm a moral guy. Like do the right thing. Not necessarily do the right thing for you, but do the right thing for the situation. It may not be in your best interest, but if you're constantly doing the right thing, and you're treating people how you want to be treated, I think that's really, really important. And fooling the money are easy part. So get out there, get educated, and the other thing is don't give up. Being an entrepreneur is tough. It's a slog for everyone who, as you guys know, don't give up. Surround yourself with mentors, with other like-minded people. If you are thinking about get a mentor, very highly recommend doing it because if they've made all the mistakes, why do you need to make the mistakes, right? You can learn from them. So yeah.
Right. Perfect.
Well, thank you so much, Reed, for being on our program. That so much value there.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was awesome. So
thank you, guys.
This is Jason and Peely with the REI Foundation podcast with Reed. Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning into the REI Foundation podcast. Check back next time for more awesome tips and strategies to launch your new you in real estate.